one fear was that nobody would show up for the session. This might be even worse now. What I want to talk about today, as the title talks about, is a way that in a class like mine, where everybody is reading different books, students choose their own books, and so they're all reading something different all throughout the year. A way that we have found to bring whole class discussions that I think add a lot to our class. And it's only something we've been doing just within the last couple of years, and something I think has added a lot to our reading workshop. So I'll kind of take through just introducing a little bit about how the discussions work, and just kind of take you through the whole process that we use. And if we have time at the end, we'll do kind of a miniature one. I don't know if we'll have time left at the end for that. And certainly not everybody will get a chance to talk during it, but just to see kind of how it works a little bit. So we'll see if we have time for that at the end of the session. So this is just a little bit about me. I just completed my 13th year, all of them teaching 7th grade reading workshop at a little Christian school in Hartville, Ohio. I say little, I mean in comparison to others, it's actually pretty big. But in comparison to probably a lot of your school districts where you teach, it might be a lot smaller than that. There's a few different ways. I would love to, talk back and forth with you, not just about this, but other things as well. There's a number of different ways you can get in contact with me. But I love, for the first number of years that I taught in a reading and writing workshop, I didn't know a single other person who taught the same way, and it was incredibly lonely for a long time, not knowing anybody, and so now, I know a lot of people personally now, but same thing, I've met others and just through events like this. So I'd love to hear from you, hear your ideas, on this or other things as well. This. Right here, some of you may have read the post where I introduced this topic a little bit there. So I will go back. I was going to do it before this session and I didn't, but all these slides will be linked to there. And every handout, if you didn't get a copy of the handout, there's not a lot, there's just a few sheets of paper there. But all of those are linked to somewhere in here, except for there might be 2 that aren't. But I'll put all that stuff, there will be links to all that stuff in here at this post here, there, that site, so you can go there and find any of those. And then I'll also, in the paper that they emailed out to everybody with the descriptions of the sessions, I'll post links there as well. So if you didn't get a copy of any handouts or anything like that, you can find all of them right there. So just real quick, okay, to talk a little bit about kind of how I got to the point where I started using these discussions. Because it was the one thing that was kind of the hardest thing for me to figure out in terms of what to do in our workshop. So for me, when I read In the Middle, it's the 2nd edition of it, after my first year of teaching, as it says there, it really changed my life as a teacher. My first year, like probably for a lot of you, did a whole bunch of different things, none of which they're really connected. It was just trying out a lot of different things, and I didn't really know, I didn't really have a clear vision for what I wanted my classroom to be like. And thankfully, one of my professors in college recommended that we get that book and read it. And so during the summer, after my first year, I sat down in late July and read it. And I knew right from the opening chapter that this was what I wanted my class to be like. And I was really blown away by it, because it just never, I never even had a concept that you could teach like this, where everybody's doing something different, and just the whole structure, everything about it was something that I had never even thought of before reading this book. And so it was really, that's, I think, the single moment that's had the greatest influence on how my classroom is set up and how I teach. And after doing it for a long time, some things took me quite a while. There was lots of issues to work through in the first few years of doing it. As I said, I didn't know anybody else who was doing it the same way, so I was kind of trying to figure out some of those things on my own. But after starting to kind of get a handle on some of those, the one thing that I still didn't really have a good idea for was what we do as a whole class in reading that kind of organizes our year. Writing, we have different genres that we study, and that kind of is the way that the whole year is organized. But in reading, there wasn't really anything. And so, we would, do different units on different things and stuff, but I didn't really have anything that kind of brought all of that together. And several years ago, I came across an idea that originated with Glenn Powers. He teaches at the school that Nancy created up in Maine. He teaches 5th and 6th grade there. And I don't remember how I came across the idea originally, but I had read a little bit about it. I found a presentation. I found like the slides that he had done in a presentation at NCT up in Boston like 5 or 6 years ago. So I went through those, and I was kind of intrigued by the idea. And so I experimented a little bit with it in my class for a couple of years. Some of the things that we were already talking about, we used this format for. And then it wasn't until 2 years ago when my administration finally agreed, after I tried a few years to convince them, they finally agreed to pay for me to go up to CTL as part of their intern program. And so it was in the lead up to that, as I was reading more, they sent some articles that they wanted us to read, and so I was reading some things that he had written. And as I was reading more, I started to think that maybe this can be that thing that kind of puts our whole class reading time that kind of brings it together. And after being there for a week and watching both he and Ann, Nancy's daughter, teaches in 7th and 8th grade there now, watching them and observing them, talking with them, I came back knowing, all right, I want to try to kind of use this all throughout the year. And so that was in April, and so for the last 2 months of that year, I started to kind of put the schedule in place. And then last year, we did it from the beginning, full time, all throughout the year. And I do want to just stop for a minute too. If any of you ever have the opportunity to go up there, it is pricey. I don't know that I could have afforded to do it on my own. I was fortunate to have a school that covered it. But that week up there is unbelievable. It's a great professional development opportunity. It's an amazing place. And I'd really encourage you. The deadline to apply is July 15th every year, and it's really amazing. I know there's somebody that I was with that week, there's 4 of us there that week, and actually ran into her here. She was up here for the first time, and it's a really great opportunity if you ever have the chance to. So kind of the definition for these discussions that originated with clients is that these are whole class, text-based discussions that are built around some sort of big question, and we'll look at some of the types of questions that we've discussed. And students answer these using a combination of their own ideas, but then also the books that they are reading. That becomes their evidence and their examples. And that part's really important. They're essentially kind of researching this question, but their source, where they're getting their information and their ideas and their evidence and everything, comes from the books that they've read. And so in a class of 18 kids, you could have 18 different books, or even more. Sometimes they write about multiple paragraphs or more than one. There could be 25, 30 different books that are discussed over the course of that discussion. So first, just some of the benefits that I've seen. At 5, there's a lot more in this, but these are 5 of the ones that I think stand out the most. The first one, just very simply, is this is a way to allow for whole class discussions when everybody is doing something a little bit different. Okay? The second one, which I think is the most important to me, is it really puts the students' ideas at the center. You have one copy. It was the loose paper that I forgot to staple with the rest of them. That's just from one of the discussions. Those are the notes that are typed up. And all of those are ideas that came from students that were talked about during that discussion. Some of them kind of contradict each other because they didn't agree on some of the ideas there. But it's a way to allow them to kind of collectively put together their understanding on this topic. And not just be me telling them, hey, here's what I think about this, or teaching them about it. But it's a way for them all together to do that I really like. It emphasizes the use of evidence and examples, which is something that is important, is emphasized right now in a lot of standards and stuff like that. It gives them an opportunity to do that every single week, to build their ideas around examples and evidence from the books that they're reading. I really like the fact that it provides a consistent structure all through the year. The topics change, so it's not like it gets redundant, but at the same time you can compare stuff they wrote at the beginning of the year. And the structure of the paragraphs, the way they prepare, doesn't really change. And so you can see a lot of growth over the course of the year from the things they wrote for our early discussions compared to the ones they wrote later. In terms of their contributions, students who don't say a word for the first several discussions, who become really readily participating and contributing later on in the year. And then, I'm fortunate, I teach at a school where, we have to follow the standards and our students are tested, but it's also not emphasized or kind of like put over us as much as I'm sure it is for some of you. But at the same time, we do have standards that we're accountable for. And just through these discussions, which is just a small part of what we do, you can hit almost all of the reading, quite a few of the writing, and a lot of the speaking and listening standards for whatever your state uses. A lot of them can be covered through these discussions. So this is the schedule I came up with to kind of fit them in. This is how they work. So the one other thing that we do in reading besides this is once a month, every student writes a letter essay. One of Nancy Atwell's ideas is based on that. It's a kind of an extended personal and critical response that they write to one of the books that they finished in the last several weeks. They each have a partner in class that they write to, and they write back and forth and respond. And so we still kept doing that. I cut it down. It used to be every 3 weeks it would cycle through, but I made it once a month. And so to make the schedule work, as my first block, I teach 3 blocks of 85 minutes each. And so my first block, they might be writing a letter essay that first week. Okay? And my second 2 blocks, block C, B and C, they're having a roundtable discussion that week. Okay? Then the second week, that letter essay rotates to block B. Okay? And so block A, they're talking about the topic that this class did the week before. Okay? And block C, okay, since they've already discussed that, they're moving on to whatever the next topic is going to be. Okay? And then week 3 is where everybody catches up. Okay? So now block C is doing their letter essay that week. Okay? Blocks A and B, they're discussing the topic they have not gotten to yet. And then if there is a 4th week, which there is quite often, other than if it's the last week of a quarter, we do stuff a little bit different. But otherwise, that extra week, then everybody would be having a roundtable discussion as well. Right? Now, if I wasn't doing letter essays and things like that, I mean, I wouldn't have to worry about a schedule like this. But this is a way we could continue to do those, and it takes away. There's no other work that classes have to worry about during those weeks. Hey, now for the roundtables themselves, this is our schedule right here. So Tuesday. And usually Wednesday more often, but Tuesday or Wednesday, this is where I introduce the topic that we're going to be discussing that week. Right? If there's a mini lesson that goes along with it, I'll teach it. Sometimes, a lot of times there is, sometimes there's not. Just depends on the topic. When I'll do it Tuesday, when I'll start on Tuesday is usually if there's something that we're reading, like an article or something to go along with it. Or there's like one discussion that we watched a TED Talk that Grace Lynn, the author Grace Lynn did, and so we watched that on Tuesday before it's then introduce the topic on Wednesday. But usually Wednesday, that's the bulk of when that takes place. Okay? It gives the opportunity to introduce the topic, takes questions from the students, and all of that. Then Wednesday and Thursday, students prepare for the discussion. I try to give at least 15 to 20 minutes on one of those 2 days in class for them to work. Their homework is to read every night, so I try to, as much as possible, minimize the amount of other things that they have to work on outside of class. This time can come either Wednesday or Thursday, but most of the time it comes Thursday because that gives them an opportunity from Wednesday to Thursday to decide what book or books they want to write about for that discussion, so they're not wasting like 10 of those minutes trying to decide on their book. They can come in the next day knowing, here's what I'm writing about, I've already decided that, and then they can make full use of that time to actually prepare for the discussion. And then Friday is our roundtable day. I chose that day for a couple of reasons. Our blocks are shorter that day, so it's hard to do reading and writing workshop anyway. So we don't do writing workshop on Fridays. It's just Monday through Thursday, and so that was the main reason. And we did them on Fridays, and those can last. I would say the average is probably 40 to 45 minutes that we use for those. Again, it kind of varies depending on our topic and how much students have to say about it. Then students' job is done on Friday. Okay? Over the weekend, then I have a few things that I do. The other reason I do them on Fridays is, in addition to teaching, I'm an assistant with the men's basketball program at the University of Mount Union. And so when we're in season, we have a lot of like Saturdays where we might have a 2 or 3 hour bus ride. So that is my time to do all of this work here, so I don't have to do it at home. So it kind of works in my schedule as well. But over the weekend, I go through students' prep. Okay? And none of this we don't grade anything during the quarter. I'll talk a little bit later about how we assess them. But I go through and leave 1 to 2 comments, some good things that they've done, but also something that I wanted to see them work on the next time around in their prep. And so I'll leave those comments. Okay? Then I go through, I have a spreadsheet where I keep all of my notes, and while I'm waiting for the next student's paragraphs to load, I'll add just kind of a shorthand version of what I put in my spreadsheet so that I have records of that there. Okay? And I also add notes on their contributions that they made to the discussions as well. Okay? Then, since I'm not grading these, I copy and paste my notes, the shortened version of those, into our online grade book. So that's what parents see, as they see feedback on that students have received, both about the discussion itself and then also the prep that they did ahead of time. And then my last step then is to type up the notes from the discussion itself, okay?